Did the Rams strike a little fear in the Philadelphia Eagles after their 9-sack performance versus the Minnesota Vikings in the wildcard round? We're going to talk about all that and much more on today's episode of the Rams Digest. I'm your host, Joshua Giron. If you guys are not subscribed to the channel, do me a favor and press that subscribe button, as 81.7% of you guys still are not subscribed to the channel. So do me a favor, press the subscribe button so you don't miss any daily Rams content here at the Rams Digest. Let's get into this first bit of news here. A little bit of Eagles talk, or at least talk from Eagles players. A bleeping horror show. Who said that? What are we talking about? Let's get into details about this story, as the offensive line of the Philadelphia Eagles, two key pieces on that offensive line, the ones who really are the most important in protecting their quarterback, Jalen Hurts, have something to say about the performance versus the Minnesota Vikings for the Rams, and talk about how they noticed it and how it was a bleeping horror show. And we're going to pull that up here as we have a bleeping horror show. Rams, 9 sacks. Sure got Eagles attention. And we do have a couple quotes to pull up here. We'll pull them up in a second to talk about what Jordan Mailata, the left tackle of the Philadelphia Eagles, had to say about the Rams defense and their defensive performance versus the Minnesota Vikings, as well as Lane Johnson, the right tackle. I mean, two great athletes, great players who have seen this Rams defense at some point this year. Week 12 it was when the Rams played the Philadelphia Eagles. And so they've seen this team before, but they had something to say about that 9-sack performance. And we'll pull those quotes up here. As Jordan Mailata, Eagles left tackle, says, "The Vikings pissed me off. I'm not going to lie to you. The Vikings pissed me off. They made the Rams look like it was out of the world. I mean, they're a great defense, and those guys played tough, and the Vikings just weren't matching the physical battle. It was all night, which I tip my hat off to the Rams. Like, that was evident. You could see that from the jump. It was just, clash. And Jordan Mailata, arguably one of the better offensive linemen in the NFL, probably arguably one of the best left tackles in the NFL. I think I would say a top 3 to 5 left tackle in the NFL. And so a great player, someone who has been a good player, a staple on that Philadelphia Eagles offensive line for a few years now. And he noticed what the Rams did to the Vikings. Now, Jordan Mailata was more acknowledging, he was more mad at the Vikings, maybe making it look like it was really easy for the Rams, and they were just this scary defense that we talked about, right, all week long. A lot of people were saying this looks like the best defense in the league, arguably. At least that's just the performance that they put out there. I mean, not many defenses out there go for 9 sacks in one game, and so they did look like one of the better defenses in the league. And I think Jordan Mailata is acknowledging that he felt like it was more the Vikings not fighting back, not being physical enough, not making it look like the Rams were the superior, crazy defense we've never seen before. He does tip the cap to the Rams, but he did acknowledge that it was more maybe from his perspective more the Vikings not taking care of business, and that is an interesting perspective to have, because I do think that the Philadelphia Eagles are a different team from the Minnesota Vikings, obviously, but the Philadelphia Eagles are more of a physical team, and we've talked about this with the Rams all season long, right? Stopping the run has been, of course, in general, the defense hasn't been playing the best all season long necessarily. The last few weeks, of course, they've been playing really well. Take out that Seattle Seahawks game, I don't think they've allowed over 10 points in the last 4 games or so. And so the Rams have been playing really well on defense, but they are a run downhill kind of a little bit of a smaller defensive line, if you will, right? Kobe Turner, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, and Byron Young. Those guys are all great players, and they're super fast, and I think they get to the quarterback really quickly, and they're very dynamic and versatile the way they move around. We saw and gave credit to the backup defensive linemen as well, the Neville Gallimores of the world, the Bobby Brown III, who actually is dealing with an injury. But you guys get what I'm saying. All these guys on the defensive line, such a deep defensive line, but they are a little bit on the thinner side, if you will. And I just mean by saying they've showed it all year long. They haven't necessarily been the best run defense all season long. And so that is kind of the concern for the Rams. We saw what happened the last time they played the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, it wasn't just a good game from Saquon Barkley. It was 255 rushing yards. I'm not saying yards from scrimmage or yards, or we're not saying any kind of like stipulation to it. It was 255 rushing yards. And we'll pull the stats up in a bit for that last game versus Philadelphia Eagles. And so we talked about this going into the Minnesota Vikings game. Maybe we weren't as scared to face the Minnesota Vikings. We've seen them. We've played them. We can beat the Minnesota Vikings. And the Rams showed that they could beat the Vikings. But the Eagles, it's a little bit of a different story. You saw what they can do. We saw how almost the first half, even with the first half, it almost felt like it wasn't really a game, right? So it's a little bit of a different perspective here. And the Eagles are a different team. They are a more physical team. And so that is where Jordan Mailata is kind of acknowledging that he thought maybe there should have been more physicality from the Vikings' perspective, and maybe that's their mentality for the Eagles to face the Rams. Be more physical, and we'll see what Lane Johnson had to say about everything, as Lane Johnson, the Eagles' right tackle, Hall of Fame, Pro Bowl right tackle, if I will add. It's like their whole D-line, they all have about 8 sacks. Their pressures are up. I feel like individually they're really good. They can create pressure, and then they do a great job of running games together. So if you watch the Minnesota game, it was a bleeping horror show. People getting beat one-on-one, bleep. Thank God Aaron Donald isn't still there. And we've talked about this multiple times as well, right here on the channel, some comments as well. Man, imagine if we just had Aaron Donald. Obviously, Aaron Donald was out at the game in Arizona, watching, enjoying the game with his family. And so it was, a small reminder of how just a couple years ago, we had one of the best, if not the best, defensive linemen in NFL history on the Rams team. And now this defense is all of a sudden getting to the quarterback 9 times in a game, 9 sacks in one single game without Aaron Donald. Man, imagine if Aaron Donald still played just a couple more seasons. And he looked like he still can play, right? We talked about even signing him earlier this year if it was possible. And so, that is an honor, for sure, to hear from Lane Johnson, to hear from him acknowledging and how crazy and how much of a horror show, if you will, that performance was versus Minnesota Vikings for the Rams. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a different story versus the Philadelphia Eagles. I think you're going to see a different we can't expect 9 sacks from the Rams. I mean, that's the first thing, right? You can't expect the Rams what happened? You look so good against the Sam Darnold and Minnesota Vikings. Why can't you get 9 sacks against Jalen Hurts? More mobile quarterback, a better offensive line, a more physical offensive line, a more experienced offensive line, cold weather game, a really, really good running back, arguably one of the best running backs in the NFL, arguably the best running back in the NFL this year, right? So it's going to be a different story. It's going to be a different type of battle for the Rams, and we're going to talk about all of that continuing on for the rest of the weekend to see how we can prepare for the Rams and some key stats going into this game. Maybe we can pull up some stats over the next couple of days of the last few weeks and how the Rams have succeeded against the other teams, as they only kept a few teams. They kept the last few teams under 10 points per game, and so that's kind of the battle that Sean McVay is going to have. That's kind of the work that they're putting in this week, that is understanding that the Minnesota Vikings are going to be a different squad. And also, you just expended so much energy, right? So much emotional energy into the game versus the Minnesota Vikings. Can you pack that up again and take it with you to the Philadelphia to have that energy? The Rams don't need necessarily outside motivation, but what can they do to continue to motivate this squad? The LA Fire situation is still a difficult situation for Los Angeles people to deal with, but maybe it's lesser of an impact, right, going into this game versus Philadelphia for the sake of storylines, right? And so is that going to be used as motivation? What is Sean McVay going to say to this team to get them ready to be physical versus the Philadelphia Eagles? We're going to have to wait and see on all of that. So it's very, very intriguing and very interesting to see what's going to happen on Sunday afternoon. But speaking of Sunday afternoon, right, from the desert of Arizona to the snow, that's not really what we expected, although what you kind of always are concerned about when you're facing a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, an East Coast team, outdoor arena or outdoor stadium in January. Definitely something you want to be concerned about. And so we'll pull this up here. As I was going to actually pull up some stuff from the last matchup for the Rams. But snow in Philadelphia, right? Is that what's going to happen? Is that what we're going to see? I mean, it's what the Rams kind of have to prepare for, right? If that is what it comes down to, and it is a snowy, colder game, the Rams are going to have to use that running game heavily, right? And we talked about this as well. It's a different team you're playing as opposed to the Minnesota Vikings. And so physicality, not just on the offense for the Eagles, physicality on the defense for the Eagles. And so, we could pull up actually, we'll get into this quick little note here as the reason why I was talking about the snow is an Arctic front is set to sweep through the region just in time for Sunday's 3 p.m. kickoff, Eastern Time kickoff, at Lincoln Financial Field, bringing plunging temperatures and the potential for snow. So it's going to be really cold for sure. We know that. It's going to be really cold for sure. Is it going to snow? That's still up in the air, and that is a concern. Again, run game for the Eagles, right? Obviously, any snow game, any cold game, you're going to want to run first and be more physical. That's kind of the Eagles' game. That's kind of what they like to do. They want to be physical. They want to run the football. They also want to stop the run, and they are decent in the pass rush, right? So we can go back and pull up some stuff from the last time the Eagles and Rams played at SoFi Stadium. 37-20 was the final score. This is back in Week 12, so a few weeks ago. And Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles, acknowledged that it was a few weeks ago. Things have changed. The teams have changed. I was about to start singing a Drake song right now. Things change, people change. Anyways, things have changed since Week 12, right? But 37-20 at halftime, pretty much. This game was over. The Rams were a 5-6 team. Now you're looking at a 10-7 team, right? A lot of things have changed since this Week 12 game, but the one thing that hasn't is the Philadelphia Eagles and them running the football, and that has not changed. And so we do want to pull up here the team stats a little bit. As you can see from that game, just general team stats. Jalen Hurts, decent game. I think if you force him to be a passer, you force him to drop back and throw the ball, it might be at least something that is more effective for you. I'm not saying that Jalen Hurts can't throw the football, but you saw that game, they scored 37 points and he only had 179 passing yards. So that wasn't really their key to victory necessarily. As you saw down there, I talked about it already, 26 carries for Saquon Barkley. That's going to be about the same amount of carries he has in this cold weather game, I'm sure. 255 rushing yards cannot happen. 2 rushing touchdowns cannot happen. And then on top of that, A.J. Brown had 109 receiving yards. And out of Jalen Hurts' 109 receiving yards, out of Jalen Hurts' 179 passing yards. So Jalen Hurts only passed 70 yards to somebody else that wasn't named A.J. Brown. And so that's also something that the Rams are going to have to acknowledge in their defensive game plan. You see Matthew Stafford side of things. That's what's kind of scary to me, right? Even though it's just the raw numbers and the raw data we're looking at here, still, on paper, Matthew Stafford, 243 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. That's a good game. You want the Rams to win that game. Kyren Williams, 16 carries, 17 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown. Okay, maybe you want a little more production from Kyren Williams, but that's a pretty good game from Kyren Williams. Puka Nacua, 9 receptions, 117 receiving yards, something we kind of expect out of him, especially if the Rams are going to win. That's the recipe for success for the Rams, right? Especially the last few weeks. We talked about how, yes, in the playoff game, they did score 27 points, but the defense scored, right? So the Rams have been scoring about 15 to 20 points a game, yet the defense has been holding the opponents to under 20. And I think that's kind of the concern here. The defense is key. You can't give up 255 rushing yards to Saquon Barkley, obviously. You can't give up 37 points to the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously, because your offense, even on a good day, may be looking more towards that 20 to 25 points per game range, and the defense is going to have to hold the Eagles to under that, right? And it's a cold weather game, so maybe that helps. But just some keys here to kind of look at it. We could even pull up, if you want, to pull up the team stats for that day. As you can see, 481 total yards for the Eagles, 167 passing yards, 314 rushing yards total for the day. Over 300 rushing yards for the day. For the Eagles, 7.1 yards per play versus the Rams, 4.9 yards per play. And so, all of that is definitely a huge impact on what's going to happen for Sunday. You can't have that happen, of course. Time of possession was dominated by the Eagles the last matchup. The penalties were even. The Rams did lose the turnover battle. The Rams gave up a lot more sacks than the Eagles did. The Rams punted the ball more. The Rams failed on third down much more, as they had 0 for 8 on that day on third down conversions. They were 3 for 3 on fourth down conversions, positive, but overall the Eagles beat you in every single way last time you matched up. So you got to make sure that stuff doesn't happen again, obviously, right? And so we'll move on from that. Last bit of things to talk about before we move on, or call it a day. Injury update. I did talk about this a couple episodes ago. I mentioned the injury update after the game. Obviously, we're worried about Tyler Higbee. We're worried about Bobby Brown. We're worried about Ahkello Witherspoon. And unfortunately, the update right now is, I didn't even pull it up. The Rams released their first injury report of the divisional round. They added 4 names to their injury report after a physical game versus Minnesota. And we talked about that concern, right? So far, so good, right? W kind of on Sean McVay's part to decide to not play versus Seattle, because you can understand that just one game, one physical division battle game could leave your team beat up, bruised going into their next matchup. And who cares who we play? If we're healthy and ready to go, we're going to be ready to go to beat anybody. They beat the Minnesota Vikings handily, take care of business. Incredible game, of course. Emotions involved, a team that's rested, a team that's ready to play mentally, right? Ready to battle whoever. That was obviously a bunch of keys to them beating the Minnesota Vikings. Now this game, you're dealing with a little bit of injuries. A couple guys banged up. Tyler Higbee, as far as we know, is expected to play. So Tyler Higbee is actually going to try his best to power through. Sean McVay did also mentioned that he has not heard from the vice president of sports health yet. So I just want to acknowledge that he has not spoken to Reggie Scott, who is the vice president of sports health and performance for the Rams. So Tyler Higbee's ready to go. Is it official that they're going to let him be ready to go? That is kind of the concern here. And so we're going to have to see what happens again. For those who missed it, maybe he was coughing up blood after the game, dealing with a chest injury, actually missed the entirety of the second half of that game. So definitely concerning. We had a great first half, a great first quarter from Tyler Higbee. So we're hoping that he can be there, a huge weapon for the Rams. They are hoping they don't miss him. Defensive tackle Bobby Brown did not participate in practice due to his shoulder injury. So if he's unable to play, we're looking at like a Tyler Davis, Neville Gallimore getting some more time on the field for the Rams. And so that's unfortunate, but we talk about how much the depth the Rams have, right, on their defensive line. So it's a positive for them with the depth, but you don't want to see anyone go down. So that's a little bit, you hope Bobby Brown can be healthy. And then defensive back Ahkello Witherspoon, who's been a great piece for the Rams all year long. He also did not participate in practice. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. And so, we're looking at maybe Emmanuel Forbes, who wasn't even active versus Minnesota Vikings, could maybe get some, at least a call up, right, onto the 53-man roster. We'll see what's going to happen with that. Lastly, I said 4 names. So the 4th name here is Alaric Jackson. He did not participate in practice due to a chest injury. Nerve-wracking here because if Alaric Jackson cannot play at left tackle, we are looking at a guy like Joe Noteboom, right, coming into play, adding to the 53-man roster, probably playing some time at left tackle. He has not been having the greatest of seasons. But we talked about this is why you wanted that rest day, right, for the Rams versus the Seattle Seahawks, right? You want to get these guys some time. Hopefully they were able to get that time versus Seattle Seahawks, and they're all ready to go, ready to play if needed this Sunday versus the Philadelphia Eagles. That's going to do it for me on today's episode of the Rams Digest. All weekend long, we're going to talk about this game preparation for the Philadelphia Eagles in the divisional round, hoping the Rams can come out on top on Sunday. Again, that's going to do it for me on today's episode of the Rams Digest. I'm your host, Josh Giron, and I am out.